being said, I will turn it over to Jill. Jill's going to take a little time to present, and then at the end we will have some time for questions. So with that, I'll hand it over to Jill.
Great, thanks, Shane. So those of you who don't know me, my name is Jill Burrows. As Shane said, I am the Director of IT Certification and the Senior Security Consultant for Alpine. I've been here now for about a year, but I've been in the industry over 10 years. I've previously been with Pearson VUE, where I worked as their Director of Security, and before that I was at CompTIA, where I ran their certification program. And in a previous life, I like to say, I was a private investigator for 10 years. So that is where my security and investigations background comes from. So a little about Alpine, for those of you who don't know us. Alpine was started in 1991, and at that point we were known as Alpine Media. In 2005, the company was reinvented when Brian Adams came on board as the CEO, and he renamed us Alpine Testing Solutions to better align with the company's renewed mission, which is focusing on providing high-quality, practical solutions in the areas of test development, psychometric consultation, and candidate and credential management. Most recently, we've added security consultation to our core competencies, which is what brings us here today. A unique aspect of Alpine is that we are completely virtual office, and we have grown to be 44 employees across 13 states. And at the end of 2012, Alpine became an employee-owned company, and this sense of entrepreneurship really permeates across the company and is ingrained in our culture. We approach the organizations that we serve with a partnership attitude, and we are here to be your partner and help you accomplish your goals. So I know many of you on the phone are current CertMetrics clients, so I won't go into a lot of detail, but for those of you that are not familiar with CertMetrics, it is Alpine's credential management system, and it helps organizations efficiently manage their testing data. So CertMetrics has several different components and features, which we will refer to as modules, but for today we're going to focus on security. And we're going to go over some of the individual features of the security module, and most importantly, how those features can enhance your program. So specifically, the topics that we're going to cover today are automated detection of anomalous data, which is basically automated data forensics tailored to your program, how you can systematically enforce your security policies, and how this can save you time and money. And lastly, we'll cover near real-time data forensics, and I'll go into more detail as to what I mean by near real-time later on. So with that, we'll jump right into it. Automated detection of anomalous data. That's a mouthful for me to say, and I'm sure for you to listen to me say. So I'm going to simplify that, and I'm going to refer to them as security scripts. And what these scripts do is provide basic data forensic analysis using preset parameters. And these scripts can be based on policies such as exam retake or on exam level detail to detect rapid exam completion or high score, low time, or various other things. Because CertMetrics stores all of the candidates' previous exam results, it's possible to detect anomalies based on comparative analyses across previous administrations of exams, as well as anomalies specific to an exam that's currently being imported. So at this point, we have 13 scripts. There are 11 shown on the screen right now, but we also have the ability to create custom scripts for your program. The scripts do have default settings, but in order to take action against individual candidates, a testing program really needs more precise estimates of probability than the listed defaults. So we strongly advise that you work with your psychometrician and or your legal counsel to identify specific parameters for your program. So why is this useful, and how is it going to help the security of your program, right? That's why we're here. So let's look at an example. The script we're going to use for the example is possible collusion, and then you can see that is right here. Collusion being when two or more candidates are acting together to cheat or somehow defraud the test. So the way the script is set up, it detects any candidates at the same test center on the same date that scored within a certain percentage of each other on the same exam. The default on this script is 5%, but again, I strongly suggest you customize this percentage by having a psychometrician look at your program-specific data and have your attorney advise on the legal threshold that he or she feels you need to hit, because that's very important. There are two different things you can identify with this script. Obviously, the first being individual candidates that are possibly colluding together, but also it can identify suspect test centers as well. If you see several flags happening at the same test center, that's an indication to investigate that test center further. So you have all your scripts set up, and you can come in and you log into your dashboard on CertMetrics. As you can see, that's what a sample dashboard will look like. There you can see all of the exams that have been flagged for review. And this is where all of the candidates flagged by any of the various scripts that you have set up will show up for you. It gives you the candidate name, the exam taken, the possible violation, and a short description. So at this point, you can manually go in and review each candidate file. So here's an example of an individual candidate file. By looking at this candidate record, you can determine if you need to investigate further. For example, you could send the candidate an email requesting more information. You can open an investigation with your test delivery provider for possible collusion. I would recommend requesting CCTV footage if it's available, or login sheets to review. You can determine the individual test center. I'll show you right here for those of you who aren't familiar with the individual test records. You can see the test center ID right there. At this point, you can look at any patterns that need to be reviewed. You have all of the information in front of you, and all of the analysis has been done automatically and detected anomalies in the candidate data based on your program parameters. So this can save your security resource the time of going in and comparing the data manually. And most programs I've seen are using spreadsheets. By having this done automatically, this frees up your resource for them to do other tasks, which is great. But what if you don't have a full-time security person, which many programs don't? I know a lot of the people in this industry wear many different hats. I know I did. So that's when the systematic enforcement comes in. In the case of a dashboard, in the example, looks like it spans about 3 to 4 months, and there's not too many flagged records. I think if all of us on the phone had only this many flagged records in 3 or 4 months, we'd be thrilled. But I don't think this is an actual good example of what it would look like. If you have a larger or a more visible program, the number of flagged records can become extremely cumbersome and overwhelming, even if you have a full-time security person responsible for them. So I'll walk you through a quick example. When I was running a large program for several years, we'll say to be optimistic, I was flagging about 2% of all records. Now, the number of records you're going to flag is going to be dependent on how conservative you set your parameters. 2 to 5% is usually about average. 2% is going to be on, like I said, the really conservative side. In the program that I was working with, even at 2%, that would net me over 400 flagged records a month to go through. Now, even if I would have had a full-time security manager, having them manually try and adjudicate 400 candidate anomalies is almost impossible. So this is where the systematic enforcement will come in. CertMetrics can use the results of the scripts and initiate appropriate actions that you have predefined and are systematically applied across all candidates. Now, why is this important? It needs to be fair and equitable across the board. If any of you have an accreditation, either from ICE or ANSI, it's a very important point. And in order to maintain your accreditation, you must prove that you are adjudicating all issues consistently and fairly. And they will want to prove that you've acted in good faith. So some examples of systematic enforcement that you can set up. Pre-written emails that can be automatically sent to a candidate. Depending on the egregiousness of the issue, it can be a warning letter saying you have been flagged by our data forensics and you will be put on a watch list. If you have a more aggressive legal team, maybe the letter is simply you were flagged and your score has been invalidated. But either way, the best part of this is that your resource does not need to manually send the letters. It takes all of the emotion out of adjudicating the flags, and every candidate is treated the same based on the anomaly. So one caveat I will say, you really do need to have an appeals process and procedure set up in case a candidate comes back, and I will put money on the fact that you will have candidates that will come back and want to appeal the decision. So make sure that you have that process set up and in place. Okay, so now that we've talked about how we can automate data forensics and the enforcement of your security policies using scripts, let's talk about the timing. So this is a testing program using on-demand testing. On-demand means a candidate can take the exam at any time, given a test center is open and has seats available. This program is gives immediate score reports, and on the report, there's a pass-fail decision based on whether the candidate achieved a grade at or above the cut score. At this point, the results are sent to the program's credential management system, CertMetrics, if you're using that, and a credential is awarded if the candidate received the passing score. Even if the program provided a provisional score report immediately after the test, chances are the credentialing decision is informed by that provisional report, and it happens before any analysis is available. In this example, the program is doing data forensics, but they're running them after the fact, and they're doing them about once a quarter, which is very reasonable and average for a small to medium-sized program. If the program, oops, getting ahead of myself. If the program has instantly given a credentialing decision and then finds anomalies in the test results after the fact, they will need to go back and invalidate the scores and revoke the candidate certification. Now, any of you on the phone that have had to do this knows that this can be difficult and time-consuming. And maybe most importantly, you run the risk of having unqualified people out there saying they hold your credential, and that is extremely detrimental to the integrity of the program and your brand. So you can see why this model doesn't allow the program to look at data forensics prior to making that credentialing decision and why that can be detrimental. But this is the way our industry is typically making decisions. So now let's look at a model that we're calling near real-time data forensics. And I promised that I would explain what I meant by near real-time. So currently it takes the delivery providers approximately 24 to 72 hours to upload the testing data from their testing centers. If the candidate was not given a result at the time of testing and was told that their results were pending data analysis and the results would not be available for 72 hours, this will allow time for the program to run full data forensic analysis on the results prior to making the credentialing decision. This gives the test sponsors the information they need in the time frame they need it to proactively, rather than reactively, enforce their security policies. So you can see in the diagram how the security scripts and the systematic enforcement work into this model by informing the candidates automatically given the outcome of the forensic analysis. So as a candidate takes the exam, the 24 to 72 hours is used to upload into the system. And even if it's 72 hours, at the point that it hits CertMetrics, your security scripts can be run. And then at that point, you can inform with either a systematic response based on those preset parameters saying you have flagged one of our scripts, either you have been invalidated, you're being warned, or if there are no anomalies found, the score report will be given, an informed credentialing decision is made, and the candidates are notified. So what does this approach mean for our industry? Mostly IT is using this approach, and obviously that's my background, so that's really where I'm thinking most of this is happening. What are the practical implications that how we can use these near real-time data forensics in addition to systematic enforcement to build on the integrity of our programs? So those are all the slides I have for you today. I really wanted this to be an interactive session with questions. So I'm going to open the floor to questions, and hopefully we can have more of an interactive dialogue at this point.
Thanks, Jill. And with that being said, for everybody that's listening out there, usually at the top or the bottom of your screen, you have a little WebEx panel, and there is a Q&A button inside of there. If you want to open up the Q&A button, you're welcome to ask some questions. I've had a couple come in already. So I'll kind of moderate these, and then Jill, if you want to answer them, you're welcome to. We also have a couple of other resources on the line today. Charlotte Nielsen is one of our project managers specifically working on CertMetrics, and then we also have some Lisa O'Leary is also on the phone from Alpine. She is a psychometrician, so all three of them or four of them can possibly answer questions for you. So one question that we have is, do you have any recommendations in engaging our internal legal team related to security?
Absolutely. So in order to set up any security policies, each program's legal team is going to have a different threshold, in my experience. So some programs are going to have aggressive attorneys that are going to be extremely want to be extremely aggressive, and they're going to set your parameters wider. They're going to allow you to take more actions, but they're also going to be the ones that are going to have to inform you around those parameters. So it's my recommendation that you work with a psychometrician to look at the data and then present that data to your legal team so that they can look at what those parameters are and where the legal thresholds that they are comfortable with and what your company is comfortable with in order to take, especially in taking individual candidate responses. If you're going to decertify a candidate, you really need to bring the legal team in prior to doing that.
Lisa, I'm going to take you off of mute, and I'm going to pose the same question to you from a psychometric perspective. Do you have additional thoughts?
Sure, yeah, absolutely. So in thinking about determining the threshold that Jill was talking about, the key that we're interested in there from a psychometric perspective is really, what does your data look like? In other words, what are your distribution of candidates, and what is their distribution across the various items that they were administered? To really come up with thresholds for your data based on what we're actually seeing in terms of, let's say, a typical threshold would be high score, low time. So what is your typical score distribution and what is your typical time distribution? And then we'd actually look within that data to figure out really what are kind of those tail ends that is really anomalous. So instead of coming in and perhaps saying, you know, we're going to set the probability at 0.01 in terms of a difference between score and time, we would actually be able to base that probability on the actual distributions in your data and then be able to look at that from a very empirical, data-driven perspective to really be able to make defensible claims about the anomalous nature of various behaviors. So that's really the key when Jill's talking about, you know, discussing this with your psychometrician. Depending on the patterns that you see in various data sets, it would be appropriate to set thresholds at varying levels. For some exams, it might be, you know, it was geared towards a lower threshold for the MQC, and therefore you have a lot of people scoring highly. Or the exam might have some speededness involved in it, and therefore you do see people exhausting more of the time limits. So that's why it really comes into play to talk to a psychometrician, in addition to always keeping an eye on the purpose of the exam and really the intended use of those test scores to really come out with validity claims against people's test scores that are based in the data instead of just determining a threshold based on other things such as capacity to go after candidates, which is, of course, another important consideration. You don't, to Jill's point, want to flag, you know, tens of thousands of candidates and then only have the capacity within your program to maybe actually go after 5, let's say, and, of course, working with your legal counsel as well to set what that is. But the data can really help drive what's appropriate for your program.
Great, thanks, Lisa. Another question that came in, and I'll direct this one towards Jill. What are the most common ways that people cheat and or any new ways that you are seeing in the industry that people are cheating now that they weren't before?
That's a good question. So how are they cheating? There's various ways that they're cheating, but in all the ways that, you know, from low tech where they're simply bringing in a cheat sheet. I mean, we're still seeing that, to using brand new technologies that we haven't found a way to combat yet in the test centers. And that's kind of where my interest lies. So I was talking to a colleague who is currently working in the private sector as a private investigator, and he was showing me how he was testing out this new technology, and it's taking the small cameras and the cell phone paradigm to a whole new level. They're using much smaller equipment, even smaller than the buttonhole cameras that we've been seeing for years. These are things like, these are pinholes, and these are, I mean, the private investigator that I work with, he's former FBI, so he's getting all of this cutting edge technology and he's showing it to me, and I'm like, knowing the test center security procedures, we have not found a way to combat that yet. Combat these more technology-driven cheating rings, and most of the time it is rings when we're talking about this expensive technology stuff. That's one that really concerns me. I think we've found ways to combat the typical, you know, Bluetooth, you know, cell phone, someone out there. We found ways to do that. I know at Prometric they're using the wands, and that's had some you know, good responses. But this technology that is not detectable by wands, it's a plastic, so the metal detectors aren't working. It's so small that there's no way even a trained proctor would be able to notice what is going on. Those are the things that are really keeping me up at night as a security professional. Not to put a damper on our conversation. Does that answer the question? Hello? Can anyone hear me?
I can hear you, Jill.
Shane, are there any other questions?
I wonder if we lost Shane.
We might have lost Shane.
Am I back?
You're back.
Okay. Let's try this one more time. What do you think about using a preliminary score report and then offering an official score report at a later date?
I'll jump in from a security perspective, and then I'll let Lisa answer from a psychometric perspective. I love it from a security perspective. With the caveat, what is on the provisional score report? Because I've seen candidates walk around with that provisional score report and employers not knowing the difference between it being provisional and it being an actual awarding of the credential. So I like the fact because it goes back to the, running the data forensics prior to making the credentialing decision and having all of the analytics in front of you before the award is made. I would just be very cautious on the wording you're putting on the provisional score report and make sure that the candidate understands that that piece of paper is not the same as having the certification. Lisa, from a psychometric perspective, do you have some thoughts?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, I think what Jill was just talking about is absolutely critical. In terms of the design of the report, the level of detail that's on the report, even the format, in terms of the way that you're delivering the information would be critical for not only the candidate to understand that this is a provisional report, but also anyone who may be consuming that report. Also, we see this with a lot of different types of score reports that we're putting out there now, but the extent to which there are clear, concise disclaimers on that report that speak to really what it is and what it isn't, and the psychometric power of really what can be used at that point. We tend to use the analogy to a child getting a lollipop, let's say, and it's a lot easier for you to never give your child the lollipop than it is to try and take away the lollipop once you have it. So from a psychometric standpoint, really this kind of almost just-in-time data forensic and then awarding the certificate is really kind of the preferred psychometric stance so that you're actually able to quickly run some basic forensics on that. So when you're awarding the certificate, you really are doing it with some level of confidence. I realize that's not possible within every program, and there is a lot of candidate demand to get their scores turned around very quickly. I would say if you were going to move forward with that, just to really proceed with all due caution that you can in terms of what you're releasing to candidates, and then really shoring up that turnaround time to the extent possible between the time they're getting kind of an initial response in terms of a pass-fail decision and what their quote-unquote final is, the final score report.
Great, thank you both. We've got a couple of questions left, and Jill, I'm going to ask you to move to that slide where you showed all of the security scripts, and I'm actually going to hand this question over to Lisa. Basically, the question is, do you have or can you provide any more information about some of the security scripts that you showed on the screen? So with that, I'll kind of hand it to Lisa.
Okay, sure, absolutely. I think depending on your program, the various scripts are of varying import. When it comes to, let's say, IT certification programs where we know that item pre-knowledge and or piracy are major issues that we're always combating, the scripts such as high score, low time, too little exam time becomes very key in terms of really being able to detect anomalous behavior between the way a candidate performs on that exam in terms of what they're actually receiving as a score, and then how long it's actually taking them to achieve that. I don't think anyone on the phone needs to be a security expert and or a psychometrician to be able to realize that somebody who gets 100% on the exam in less than 5 minutes probably didn't take all due time, even if it's only a 10-question exam, to really think through those and come up with answers on the fly. So that's really what we're looking at when we're talking about high score, low time, too little exam time, which are those 5th and 6th down. Essentially, as Jill mentioned earlier, there are some kind of standard flagging parameters built within CertMetrics that we can use. You know, exam score above, let's say, 90%, time spent on exam less than 5 minutes might be an example of kind of a cut score threshold that is just standard. Especially with high score, low time, after talking to a psychometrician about what they're seeing in your data, you can really set thresholds that are appropriate given the distributions that you're seeing in your data. Again, you would want to try and get as clear of a view as possible of your data. So if you know that, you know, from administration 200 on, you're seeing evidence of item exposure, you might want to try and base those thresholds on the first 200 candidates or something like that. If we're just going to take it from the top, exam retakes, we're really looking at the policies that you set for your exam in terms of your retake policy, and that's just a simple, you know, if your policy is a candidate's not allowed to sit for an exam within 180 days of an initial fail, and they happen to sit on the 117th day, let's say, that would just be a standard flag for exam retakes. Rapid exam completion fits in the same with the high score, low time, too little exam time. Again, you're just looking for somebody that just fed through the exam in an unacceptable amount of time for you. Retake after pass, again, that's security policy related. That's also just common sense. You know, if somebody's passed the exam, you wouldn't expect them to decide to pay for and sit for it again. That may be indicative of possible collusion. That might also be a good flag to look at a testing center to see if there's anomalous recurring problems with something like retake after pass within a certain testing center. Large score differential, again, comes back to looking at retakes. You'd be looking for a percentage increase within a particular candidate. Let's say you set that at a 50% increase between sitting for exam 1 and sitting for exam 2. Again, you would want to look at your data to figure out what a acceptable retake percentage is, because of course if somebody fails initially and if they get any sort of feedback based on that fail, presumably they would go back and do some focused studying between exams 1 and 2. So you are always expecting some increase in scores between retakes. But this is really when you're looking at something that's above and beyond what would be considered normal, what would be considered acceptable and expected between sits 1 and 2. Again, possible collusion, Jill already spoke to that one, so I won't cover that, but you're basically just looking within a certain percentage threshold matching between 2 candidates on the same day at the same testing center. Security items, we're calling them security items here, which allows us to be pretty open in terms of what we're talking about. Essentially, there are any embedded items on your exam. These could be scored, unscored. They could be intentionally incorrectly scored Trojan horse items. Basically, any items that you're embedding that you think for some reason should be more secure than your operational items. And essentially what the script here would do would you would be flagging a candidate for scoring a certain percentage of those security items correct out of a total number of security items. So in this case, you would really be looking at something like a Trojan horse item. So let's say you have 10 incorrectly keyed Trojan horse items on your exam. This would just be a straight percent match. So any candidate that hit 10 out of 10 to the incorrect key would be flagged, for example. Differential item performance is where we can get into some really interesting psychometric work. This is where, at Alpine at least, we've done a lot of work with scored versus unscored items, setting thresholds for candidates based on distributions within the data of expected performance on your operational items to your presumably more secure items. And again, this is where we can use various item types. So within your data, it may be appropriate that you can set an automatic flag within CertMetrics that anyone who scores 90% or higher on the scored items, but 20% or lower on the unscored items gets flagged, and that would come along with a certain probability of that differential. Very powerful information to work with your legal team on if you're going after individual candidates, because it's actually based on individual probabilities of the likelihood that they would score that different on the two different sets of items. Watch list is after we go through and do an initial flag from a previous take of an exam if that candidate resits for an exam. Same thing with the ban list. It would just be sitting automatic check within CertMetrics for candidate ID and demographics. If they're on a ban list at the time of taking the test, they would not be allowed to sit for it at that point. So again, a lot of these can be generic. A lot of them have kind of basic thresholds that are set within CertMetrics. For a lot of them, though, the power inherently within the statistics that you're able to generate and also the defensibility from a legal perspective really does increase as you work further with either test developers and or psychometricians to determine the most appropriate thresholds for your particular exam. It's important to note also that the thresholds will be by exam form, not by program. So it's not appropriate to say across client A, let's say, that the threshold for all of your exams are going to be set at X, Y, and Z, because performance on X, Y, and Z exams may differ from one another.
Great, thanks so much, Lisa. And we had another question come in, I think, spanning off of what you're talking about. The question was, for security items, can Alpine identify if the candidate got the item wrong but chose a specific distractor?
Yes, we absolutely can. So in the option analyses, if you're working with Alpine psychometricians outside of CertMetrics in either provided an item selection on a beta exam and or a health check on an operational exam, in the option analyses, we're able to run it both ways. So we've done security analyses for people where we've gone and looked at hit to the security item, so picking the incorrect key. We've also gone in and looked at security items for which people actually selected the correct answer, which is not the one that's the released correct key, for two different sides of the security coin. And we've actually used both percentage-wise for differing analyses that we've done in the past. To that end, all option analyses, both within CertMetrics in the automated score reporting at the classic staff level and custom analyses that you would get from working on the analysis side with Alpine. Within our option analyses, it gives you every single response option, and then the p-value for dichotomous items is the proportion of candidates that selected that individual item. And then we are actually able to take that one step further and look at the actual response string for individual candidates. So we're able to do percent match to whatever response option you're most interested in at the item level.
Great, thank you. Just got a couple more, actually one question left from participants, and then I have a question. Do you have any recommendations for combating brain dump sites? And that is probably one I'm going to flip over to Jill first.
So my first recommendation, if you're dealing with brain dump sites, is that you're monitoring the web on a consistent and continuous basis to see what is out there. When I work with clients and when I ran my own program, I prefer a more proactive stance against brain dump sites rather than reactive. And what I mean by that is, as an industry, we've been fighting brain dump sites for as long as I can remember, and we've gone to referring to them as the whack-a-moles. So, you know, you spend a lot of time and money and effort, and you get your attorneys involved to take down one of these websites, and you find out 3 days later that they have opened up shop under a new URL, and you're no further along than you were before. So one of the strategies I used was, depending on how you're delivering your exams, we would combat it. At my program, we introduced something we called rapid form republishing. We were delivering in linear forms. And where the idea came from is everybody always, back in the day, everybody held back what we called a spare form in case you had a breach. A lot of times that spare form would fit. and it would never be used. And I thought, well, why are we doing that? Let's just rapidly republish these forms that we have sitting there so that our content is never out for longer than 30 days at a time. In my head, it was within 30 days, if someone stole it, put it up on a brain dump site, and then someone purchased it and had to memorize the content, by the time they did all of those things, those items would be retired, that form would be taken down, and we would be on to a new form with new items. So it was less about taking on the brain dump site and more about making them obsolete. So I know that the program that I used to work with has continued and built on and you know, I would say mastered this kind of this strategy where they're now doing continuous development. Now, this is a very expensive way of combating it, but using attorneys and going after websites is also expensive. This way, and I'll let Lisa comment on this as well, because I know she's done a ton of great research in this, but continuously refreshing your items has been the single most effective way of combating theft and prior knowledge from these brain dump sites. So my recommendation is try and make them obsolete rather than going at them head on with legal, because those legal fees can be, they can level a program, and you're not getting anything for your money, because I promise you they will pop back up. Lisa, if you want to go into just a little detail about the research that you've done on this continuous development and republishing.
Sure, absolutely. To Jill's point, the rapid refresh has been single-handedly by far the most effective approach that we have seen in the programs that we work with directly here at Alpine in terms of combating and staunching the effect of item exposure on exam results by far. It also opens up in situations for programs where they're not able to do complete item refreshes. There's a lot of great options it allows for you. Even if you're releasing, let's say, a 50% unscored bank with your live form, there's a lot that can be done in terms of having that comparative banks, having those comparative item pools, the scored to the unscored, presuming unscored, you can still consider to be uncompromised, and that's where the kind of rapid piece of this comes in. It's actually a mechanism with some kind of back-end work that we've been doing with differential item functioning and differential person functioning to really identify candidates that seem to be suspicious, and then taking those suspicious candidates and splitting the items out by, are these items performing consistently for suspicious and non-suspicious candidates? If there are any items within your pool that are advantageous for your suspicious candidates to take, that's a red flag right there that those are your most exposed items and should be retired as soon as possible off reviewer form. If you're able to have any of that level of information, even within a program where you can't do complete rapid refresh forms reassembly every 6 to 8 weeks, as Jill was talking about for her previous program, it certainly allows you a lens to see those items that are the most exposed, those items that are the least exposed, and then gives you a full set of previously unscored items, presumably less compromised than your other core set, from which you can have a great amount of information to really drive your examinations, to drive your reassemblies. So in a situation where you may have to do, let's say, more 3 to 4 months refreshing, 6 months refreshing, which is still better than 12 to 18 months with static forms, having all of this good wealth of information from constantly repeating unscored items really opens up your options in terms of being able to present new, different forms. They're not going to exactly match some content that may be out there on the brain dump site. And again, you're always acting proactively to constantly have a new set of items that you can plug and play in and out of your exams, as opposed to sitting on static forms and having to wait to go through a full exam dev cycle, a full exam development cycle in order to be able to refresh those forms. This approach, of course, does take time, it takes effort, it takes resources, but this ability to constantly be working on your item pool, figuring out what's really going on with it when it comes to item exposure, and reacting quickly and swiftly and in smaller pieces than doing full forms reassembly if that's not possible, has absolutely been, in our research, the best way to deal with, unfortunately, what seems to be a never-ending problem of piracy and item pre-knowledge, especially within the IT certification sector.
Awesome. Thank you both. Charlotte, I'm going to call on you at the moment. We have somebody that's asking a specific question related to CertMetrics that says if a candidate is on the watch list and if they try or if they take a test or take an exam that would require additional review, are programs notified of that? This is the first time Charlotte's talked, so we're not sure if her microphone is working or not.
All right, can you hear me now?
Now we can.
Okay. I had my phone also on mute. Yes, we have the watch list, which is something that would be able to flag a report. It would add to a report anytime an exam was taken by someone on a watch list. So you're able to, that's something you could have subscribed to you to come regularly so you can check and follow up if any additional exams have been taken by that individual.
Cool. So one question I have, and to kind of wrap things up, if anybody does have any other questions, we're getting close to the end, so please feel free to ask away. But one question that I have, because I know we have some folks in different verticals. We have professional licensure on the line. We have IT certification on the line. Jill or Lisa, are there specific differences between industries that you notice? Are there specific concerns in IT that don't exist in professional licensure, or vice versa? Or what can you share with the group about that?
So I'll go first. The answer is both. There are definitely some similarities because the cheating mechanisms are all the same. One thing I will say is that the IT sector in particular has, I won't say it's individual to IT, but it seems to be a bigger problem. The brain dump sites, the prior knowledge and being able to get the items off of the internet. I attribute that, and I've always attributed that to the candidate population. These are IT people. They understand how to get the files and get them up on the web. But unfortunately, I've seen a growth in having all of this professional licensure and certifications are also now showing up online on sites that were traditionally IT certification centric. So I think sometimes that the bad guys are now going, oh, we've been so successful in the IT certification realm that we're now going to branch out and go after some of these other verticals, which isn't good. There are some differences if we're going to talk about computer-based testing to paper and pencil, but that's a whole other webinar, to be honest. Lisa, do you have any insight?
Yeah, from my perspective, Jill, what you said is spot on. In my head, I was also going through, like we don't have issues with erasure analyses and stuff like that in IT cert primarily because we're doing all computer-based testing. I think that the structure of some of the exams between certification and licensure and IT certification and education for that matter does cause some differences. Most IT certification exams, at least the programs we're traditionally working with, are continuously administered and or they're in window administrations, but traditionally they're continuously administered compared to some professional licensure and or certification exams where there may just be a 2-week testing window or something like that. That difference in terms of the duration of time exams are out, the amount of exposure that content can have while they're out, Also, the level of import attached to the certification would be one place that I would say I've noticed just kind of, I don't want to say candidate differences, but if you think about somebody that's sitting for, let's say, a medical licensure exam, a board exam, something like that, the weight of that certification may carry with it for that person a lot more, might have a lot more weight to it than, let's say, an IT professional going to get a certification from client X in a program similar to client Y type thing that's really just a checkbox to add something to their CV. So to that end, while I agree totally with Jill's comment that it's, you know, these are IT people and therefore, you know, they're savvy and they know how to get the information and someone is out there, I also think the relative importance to their careers, the amount of time, effort, and energy that's going into sitting for some of these exams, not for all, but for some candidates and for some exams between the verticals, does differ greatly, and I do think that changes candidate behavior when they come to sit for certain exams. So the amount of within candidate trafficking, I'd say in some verticals, is higher than it is within the IT certification realm. And by that I mean, you know, candidates keeping an eye on anomalous behavior and really, you know, trying to keep the exams above board and out of and away from some security issues may be higher on like ed services, professional licensure, and credentialing exams than it is for IT certification.
All right, well, at this moment, those are all the questions that we had come in. I'll give anybody a last opportunity to post a question in the Q&A forum. If not, here in the next minute or so. We'll be wrapping up again. As I mentioned at the beginning of the call, we have already planned and are hosting our next webinar in July, and that will be related to specifically the score reporting. So if I know there was some discussions on that today, and if that's something that you would be interested in, please keep an eye on your email, and we will be discussing that or sending out invites here shortly. And I don't see any other questions coming in at the moment. So once again, thank you all for attending. We hope that you got something out of it. You will also be getting a survey to see if we provided great content today and if you have any recommendations for content in the future. So that being said, thank you to Charlotte, Jill, and Lisa, and we hope to see you back next month.